The third is the rise of Islamic extremism, terrorism, which Shlomo dealt with. I agree with him that the key is not for Israel or the United States to act, but for the West to act to build up the moderates. This can be done, and there are a growing number of moderates in the Arab world, from Morocco to Saudi Arabia, who recognize that if they don't act, if they keep on a fundamentalist direction, they will be out of the mainstream of the new globalized economy. And so what you're seeing is people who are calling themselves pajama hadid, who are emphasizing computers and not roadside bombs. The Saudis have just opened the King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, which for the first time allows women and men to learn together, to learn science and technology from a world-class faculty, because they realize that an oil economy doesn't work. Israel has a higher per capita income than the average OPEC nation. The next is the issue of non-traditional risks, and let me just deal with two: nuclear proliferation and global warming. On proliferation, there are now 8 countries which have a nuclear capability of a military sort, and 30, according to the IAEA, who in a quick period of time can develop a nuclear capacity, Iran being the most difficult. Here again, the shift in the global economy is a problem, because the tremendous increase in wealth that is shifted to the Arab countries into Iran, with $100 per barrel oil now forecast by Goldman Sachs in the next year and a half to be $200 per barrel oil, puts an enormous amount of capabilities in their hands. But Israel is not alone in dealing with Iran, and Israel must not see Iran and the nuclear threat of Iran as its own problem. It is a global problem. And the EU, 3, Germany, France, the UK is working with the US and the world to try to stop Iran from getting a nuclear capacity. Even China and Russia have said it's unacceptable for Iran to have this nuclear capability, which would be not just devastating for Israel, but for the whole world. It would set off a new nuclear age. What we have to do, again, Lolly, you asked the question about whether what the world can do. If we set up what Eisenhower talked about in the 1950s, and what Russia has proposed to do as well, is to have a world uranium enrichment bank, in which uranium is provided for countries like Iran on a civilian basis under monitoring, we can solve this problem. And last is global warming. I negotiated the Kyoto Protocols. It's something very close to my heart. Israel is a prime problem with respect to global warming because it depends on water. Israel will have half the rainfall at the end of this century that it does at the beginning of the century. But Israel, again, is well placed to take a lead because of its technological capacity in global warming. It has more solar collectors than any country in the world, and it's just signed a joint agreement with Renault and Nissan to develop electric cars throughout the country. So in all of these challenges, and others which hopefully we will discuss, which I discussed in more detail in my speech, Israel is extremely well placed to deal with the 21st century challenges of a vastly changed world.